Homework number 6. Prepare for your oral presentation and submit a source list for your research paper. This week's written work is the source list for your research paper. Additionally, you should begin working on your oral presentation that will take place at our second in-person meeting on Saturday, March 16th. More information on preparing for your talk is in this presentation. The only written work you will turn in this week is your list of sources for your end-of-term research project. Sources can include books, magazines, or professional journals, websites, people you plan to interview, and many other things. Some of the projects that have been submitted will not involve any book research. That's fine, but I do expect you to do some research. This is not an editorial or opinion piece where you should complete your work only based on your ideas. This list should include outside sources that you plan to consult to complete your written work, which could also be interviews, company brochures, newspaper articles, government publications, or any of a number of other things. If you are curious or need ideas, look at Appendix B of your textbook, where documentation of different kinds of sources is discussed. This list does not have to be complete and may change before you turn in your final work. If you have looked at the research project grading document in the assignments section of Blackboard, you know that turning in each part of your project on time is part of your grade for the project. So try to keep on schedule. I'm still missing a few research project proposals. There are also sample research papers available for you to view in the assignments section of Blackboard. Scroll to the bottom of that section to see them. On Saturday, March 16th, each student will give a talk of 2 to 3 minutes in length. In addition to giving your own talk, you will be providing feedback to other speakers. The content of your talk will come from the textbook. The point of the presentation is for you to practice your presentation skills, not to research a topic. So all the content can come directly from the book if you wish. The time you take preparing your talk will come from developing a short outline and practicing speaking. No visual aids are required for this talk, but you are welcome to create them if you wish. The PowerPoint slides for each chapter are available in my BCom lab, and you can use that material to prepare for your talk if you want to. Think about talks you have heard, lectures in classes, speeches at public forums, infomercials on television, or business presentations at your place of work. You have heard lots of talks, and some of them were better at achieving their goals than others. Why is that? Good oral presentations require specific skills, and you can study, practice, and learn those skills. We discussed some of these skills at our first class meeting when we made a list of the things the presenter did well in the TED Talk we watched. Once you have identified some of the things that can make a talk successful, you can apply some of those ideas in your own presentation. Your talk should be 2 to 3 minutes in length and should cover a topic from chapter 5, 6, or 7 in the book. Your listeners should be able to identify some of the characteristics of good presentations in your work, and you should be able to observe some of these characteristics in the other talks that you hear that day. There is a link below this video to a guide to oral presentations. In this document, a number of the ideas here are discussed in more detail. Identify your purpose. As you plan your talk, think about what you hope to accomplish. In the case of these talks, they are all informative and intend to tell your readers about a single topic. Define your audience. Your audience is college students who hope to learn these communication skills. If you are unsure about what your audience knows, it's better to include a more thorough explanation. For example, when you introduce your topic, explain what it is and why it's important. Decide what you want to accomplish. Consider what you hope your audience learns from your talk and use these ideas to help decide what to include and how to organize your work. Every talk should have a beginning, a middle, and an end. In the beginning or introduction, give your name, what you plan to discuss, and what your talk will include. This introduction helps your audience to understand the logic of your presentation. The middle or body of your talk should include all the details you want to include. Provide enough detail to develop your ideas, though you probably will not have time to include everything you know about your topic. Leave time to include an example. Finish your talk with a summary of your main ideas. This final section will be what your audience remembers best, so it should include the 2 or 3 main points of your talk. Let's look at the introduction in more detail. The audience probably doesn't remember who you are, so start with your name and tell the listeners what your topic will be. Include a 1 or 2 sentence outline of what you plan to include. This will help your listeners form a mental map of where you are going. It's much easier for your listeners to follow your logic if you include this outline. Hi, I am Vicki Austin. My talk is on using bias-free language. This is your name and your topic. I'm going to define bias-free language, explain why it's important, and then offer some examples of biased language and how it can be changed to bias-free language. This is your outline of what you plan to include. Once you've completed your introduction, move on to the body of your talk. Offer details about your subject. In the introduction, we stated that the topic would be defined, so here we've started with that definition. Bias-free language avoids words that stereotype or stigmatize people according to gender, race, ethnicity, age, or disability. This might be followed by an explanation of why it's important to use bias-free language. This answers the question for your audience, why should I care about this topic? Include examples that illustrate your point. Here the example is, instead of using traditional gender-specific job descriptions such as mailman, seek out gender-neutral job titles like letter carrier. But your completed talk would include several such examples. Use transitions between sections such as first, second, finally, or now that we have a definition of bias-free language, let's move on to an explanation of why it's important. Inform your audience when you are ready to wrap it up, then summarize the 2 or 3 main points of your talk. Does it seem repetitive and obvious to repeat something you just stated? It may seem that way to you, but it's helpful to your listeners so they can remember what the most important points are. So as you have seen, this is your transition, a good relationship with your audience depends on using bias-free words and phrases. If you can avoid using descriptions that unnecessarily describe people by age, disability, race, or other factors, you will appear fair and thus more credible in your communications. This is your summary. Thank you. For the content of this talk, choose a topic from somewhere in Chapter 5, 6, or 7. Select something that you can cover completely in 2 to 3 minutes. That's not very long. Many of these videos are twice that length or longer. If you are unsure, it's always better to cover less material and cover it in much more detail. You can always email me if you have questions about how much material to include. Remember that examples are a good way to help your audience understand your concepts. You can use examples from the book, or you can use examples from your work or other places. Examples are like small stories that illustrate your point. Here's how that would look in a discussion about parallel construction, which comes up on page 158 in your book. Parallel phrases are phrases that all take the same form, such as in Winston Churchill's famous speech to the English Parliament. We shall fight on the beaches, we shall fight on the landing grounds, we shall fight in the fields and in the streets, we shall fight in the hills. This example explains what parallel construction is and illustrates with a quote from a well-known speech. No visual aids or slides are needed, but you can use them if you want. No outside research is required. The point of this assignment is for you to practice presentation skills, not do research. If you want to do research outside of what's in the book, you can, but it's not necessary. No handouts are needed. You can use a script if you want, but the outline is probably a better choice. If you are reading word for word from a script, it will be hard for you to connect with your audience because you won't be looking up. With practice, you can use an outline and still include everything you need. The most common mistake for students is not spending enough time developing an introduction and a conclusion. Your introduction should be more than announcing your topic. Your conclusion should be more than, "That's all I have." Spend time on these two areas and you can produce a really polished presentation. The best way to ensure your success is to practice. I can't stress enough how important practice is to your success. Practice will help you know how long your talk is. Practice will help you figure out if your talk makes sense or if you need to add additional explanation. Practice will allow you to speak more readily. Practice will give you confidence and allow you to be more relaxed. A rubric for this talk is provided in the links below the video. Also, we will have a brief discussion at the beginning of class about providing constructive feedback. Learning to provide good feedback to others is part of your communication toolkit, and it requires practice too. Your written anonymous feedback will not affect the grades of you or your fellow students.